Hi, this is Miss Cassens, and this is the first part of our notes on World War II. If you are not one of my students and you found this video by accident, I guess enjoy learning about World War II. For everybody else, this is going to go along with the notes that I have posted on my website. I'm also going to have different videos and other materials posted there for you to use as well. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so the causes of World War II, a lot of this is going to come out of the outcomes of World War I. So, for example, we talked about the Treaty of Versailles that is signed in conclusion of World War I in 1918, and this is really just going to be a terrible treaty. Its goal was not so much to preserve peace, but really to make Germany feel bad about itself. And we know, hopefully, that a lot of stipulations in that treaty, such as the reparations they had to pay to Great Britain and France, are going to worsen their economic depression. Because keep in mind, this is when the Great Depression is happening around the entire world, but it's particularly bad in Germany. So they're not going to be happy about that. The League of Nations, also kind of an epic failure. It is weak, it has no authority to back up any of its decisions, so they can't stop Italy from invading Ethiopia or keep Germany out of pretty much all of Europe, especially Czechoslovakia, which we will talk about a little bit later. So the League of Nations is weak, nobody takes them seriously. That's going to fail to keep us out of World War II. But just in case you were wondering, well, that doesn't sound like enough to get us into war, don't worry. There's also a lot of nationalist movements, some very strong totalitarian leaders during this time period that are definitely going to look to war. So we're going to see a lot of aggression by Germany, Italy, and Japan. And we talked before about how Germany and Italy are now using this new political ideology called fascism. And a big part of fascism is attacking your neighbors and showing that you're stronger than them. So Italy is going to invade Ethiopia and Africa. Germany is going to invade Czechoslovakia and later Poland. They also take over Austria. But that was a weird case where they didn't actually have to invade. They just kind of, went there and were like, I own you now. Japan getting real busy in East Asia, taking over Korea, and then going into northeastern China and Manchuria and spreading out to other areas of the Pacific Islands as well. So here you can see the flag of Japan. They referred to Japan as the land of the rising sun, so you see the sun imagery a lot. And then down here, the Nazi flag with its misuse of the Indian swastika. So just in case you thought I was going to leave out some of my dumb history jokes, no, they're still in the PowerPoint. Enjoy. I'm going to go ahead and skip. If you need more time to read this, it's a video. You can pause it. Here we go. So, another unfortunate thing that leads to World War I is everyone's fear. I said the wrong war. World War II is the fear of what happened during World War I. There we go, nailed it. So we're so terrified of getting involved in another global threat that we kind of just let things go. We don't stand up to these bullies, and we fail to respond quickly to the threats that we see happening around us. And another big theme that we see here is this idea called appeasement. Appeasement is basically giving somebody what they want, hoping that they'll be satisfied and they will leave you alone. Okay? So it's kind of like if somebody's bullying you and forcing you to give them money every day, you're like, okay, cool, I'll give them money. And then they'll leave me alone and everything will be great. But unfortunately, that just encourages that bully to keep acting the way that they are. So it doesn't actually solve your problem for you. It's showing weakness to try to avoid conflict, and that does not work. One key example of the appeasement policy is in 1938, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, shown here, is going to meet with Hitler and try to get this whole thing sorted out. What are you doing? Why are you taking over stuff? And he allows Hitler, gives him permission to annex or take over the country of Czechoslovakia, which was once part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And the reason why Hitler wanted Czechoslovakia is because some people there spoke German, which for him was of enough of an excuse to take it over, but they also felt that Germany needed more what they called living space or Lebensraum in German. So he was like, I have dibs on Central Europe because Germany needs more land. Chamberlain decides, hey, if we give him more land, then he'll be happy and everything will be great. They sign a document. Hitler says he's going to stop taking over stuff. It sounds great. Chamberlain comes back to Britain waving around this document in the air like it's a victory and says that he has secured peace in our time. Except if we remember anything about Hitler, learning about him in middle school, we know that this does not work. So here we go. Once again, Hitler promises not to do stuff, but then he does it anyways. Now, again, the goal here for most people in the 1930s is to avoid going to war. And the United States is especially going to take this in an extreme direction to the point where they're like, no, war is always wrong. We're pacifist. We do not want to get involved in any fighting at all. But also combined with this American desire to be isolated and neutral. They want to be completely uninvolved with the affairs of other pretty much European nations. We don't want to get involved in another war. And so just like World War I, we are going to hang on to our policy of isolationism for as long as possible until we're directly attacked. And this was a cartoon by a very popular propaganda artist that you might recognize. It's Dr. Seuss, but during World War II and earlier periods, before he made books for children, he made propaganda, and he was known by his actual name, which is Theodore Geisel. Dr. Seuss sounds better. So, we're going to kind of pretend like this is sort of a Dora the Explorer type situation. I'm going to ask a question and act like you all answered it. So, what happened the last time America tried isolationism? Anybody? Do you know? That's right. It was the fact that America got pulled into World War I due to the fact that Germany attacked the Lusitania and also sent the Zimmerman telegram asking Mexico to invade the United States. So, when America is directly threatened, they get involved in the war real quick. So here are our main allies that we have in World War II. It's kind of similar to what we saw in World War I, but we're experiencing some name changes and some switching of sides. So just like World War I, we have one alliance network simply called the Allies. Kind of boring. That is going to be the United Kingdom, or Great Britain, or England, whatever you want to call them, France. The Soviet Union will join later for reasons I will explain at a later time. The United States will join later. You could also consider Canada and China to be members of the Allies. Keep in mind that if any of these countries have colonies, they're also fighting on the side of the Allies. And now, instead of calling them the Central Powers, the German alliance is now going to be called the Axis Powers, which does a better job of sounding a bit scarier. That's going to be Germany, Italy, Japan, and also some other more minor groups. And once again, Italy not being taken super seriously as an ally, and that is why this is amusing to me. Now, Switzerland, a lot of times people refer to Switzerland as a neutral country and kind of make jokes about that, and you might not have realized that there's a reason behind that. So, Switzerland, even though it's in Central Europe and shares a border with Germany, they are going to be neutral and they will not be attacked by Germany or by the Allies because they traditionally, for hundreds of years, have been isolated in times of war or conflicts with other countries because their job is to stay neutral because it is the Swiss Guard that protects the Pope in Rome. There's probably some other considerations to it too, but that's kind of the historical reason behind that. Now, some important leaders for the Allies. We have American President FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He's going to be responsible for trying to get America out of the Great Depression, but is also president during the very beginnings of World War II. Unfortunately, he dies in office during World War II, which means that his vice president, Harry Truman, now has to take over. Pretty much the worst promotion ever that you could have because I can't imagine a more stressful job than becoming president of the United States during World War II. But that's what Truman is going to have to deal with. We also have Winston Churchill, who is the British Prime Minister, which means he's pretty much the leader of the United Kingdom. Because keep in mind, even though there is a monarch, a king or queen of England, they at this point don't really have that much authority. They're there to advise, they're not actually running the country. That's the prime minister's job. So here is Winston Churchill. If you've ever seen a photograph of Winston Churchill, you now know what all babies look like. Look at that chin. That's what all children look like before they, look like real people. So that is Winston Churchill. A very famous quote from him during the World War II era as he's trying to bolster the spirit of the British people. If the British Empire and its Commonwealth should last for 1,000 years, men will still say that this was their finest hour. Basically trying to encourage the British people to continue to fight, never give in, we will never surrender, which is actually the theme of another famous speech of his, where he says, "We shall never surrender, we shall fight on the beaches," and it's very inspiring. This is also a period of time when British propaganda started the campaign of keep calm and carry on. So if you've seen all those posters and things, they're printed on mugs now. It's really weird. That's actually propaganda from World War II coming from Britain. Some other things I really enjoy about Winston Churchill, he had some of the best um, insults in history. So, for example, there was always a situation in which Winston Churchill would get in fights with people at dinner parties. That's just kind of his jam. He also had a very significant alcoholism problem, which probably contributed to that. But he ended up getting in a verbal altercation or fight with a woman at a party. And she said to him, "You know what, Mr. Churchill? You are drunk." And he immediately responded back with, "Yes, but in the morning I will be sober and you will still be ugly." So there you go. That's Winston Churchill in a nutshell. Some of our important Allied generals, these are all American generals. Of course, there were other important leaders of militaries in other countries, but Eisenhower, pictured here on the left, is going to be pretty much in charge of European forces. MacArthur, here in the middle, is going to be the general in charge of what we're doing in the Pacific and Asia. And later on, he will also be put in charge of Japan. And then Marshall, he is the one that is going to create a plan for how to rebuild Europe after the war is over. And we'll get to him a little bit more later. And of course, just kind of recapping our important leaders of Axis powers that have come to power in the 20s and 30s. We mentioned them a lot more in detail in our last notes, but we have, of course, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union, Benito Mussolini of Italy, Hideki Tojo, and Emperor Hirohito of Japan. Keeping in mind, of course, that Emperor Hirohito is mostly a figurehead. Most military decisions are being made by his generals, led by Tojo. And that's where I'm going to stop here, guys, so that this is not a hugely long video. If you have any questions, feel free to email me and contact me, and I will post part 2 later.